Friday night. Warehouse floor empty. Forklifts parked in a row like sleeping animals. The fluorescent lights in the break room are still buzzing because Dwayne hasn't left yet. He's sitting at the same folding table where he eats lunch every day. Same metal chair, same thermos with the dented cap he never replaced. In front of him, next to a balled-up sandwich wrapper, there's a calculator. Not a phone app, a desk calculator, the kind with the big plastic keys and no backlight. He bought it at an office supply store the year his daughter started middle school. That was 15 years ago. He punches in the same number he punches in every month. His automatic deposit, $460. He doesn't check the market. He doesn't check his returns. He checks if the money left his account. It did. Same as last month. Same as the month before that. Same as every month for the last 15 years. The other guys on his shift would find this bizarre. Not the investing, the ritual. The way he sits down after everyone leaves, opens the banking app just long enough to confirm the transfer, then punches the number into the calculator as if the machine's confirmation means something the phone's doesn't. It does to him. The phone is abstract. The calculator is real. He can feel the keys click. He can hear the tiny mechanical sound of each digit registering. Dwayne is 65 years old. He supervises a warehouse in Dayton, Ohio. Peak salary, $56,000 a year. He's been at the same company for 19 years. He drives a truck with 200,000 miles on it, bought it used 11 years ago, and never saw a reason to replace it. He has never bought an individual stock, never sold a position, doesn't know what a PE ratio is, couldn't name 3 companies in the S&P 500 if you asked. His net worth just crossed $780,000. Now, there's a man named Scott who would hear that number and feel physically sick. Not because it's a lot, but because it's more than his. Scott is a marketing manager, $95,000 a year. He opened his first brokerage account at 28. He's been in the market 22 years longer than Dwayne. He has read more books, followed more analysts, made more trades, and earned almost twice as much every single year. He has less, not a little less, meaningfully less. And it's not because Scott is dumb. Scott is sharp, educated, curious. He did everything the internet tells you to do. He started early, he diversified, he stayed informed, and that's exactly what went wrong. This isn't a video about money. It's a video about what happens inside the mind of someone who starts investing at 50. The 7 psychological traits that people like Dwayne develop precisely because they started late. Traits that people like Scott, who started early and did everything right on paper, almost never build. You're going to see all 7. And by the end, you'll understand why starting late might be the most dangerous advantage in personal finance. Dwayne didn't start investing because he felt ready. He started because he couldn't look at the number anymore. He was 50 years old. His daughter was heading to middle school. His 401k had been sitting at the company default 1% for over a decade. He'd never changed it, never thought about it, never opened a single statement. And one afternoon in the break room, someone mentioned the word retirement, and Dwayne pulled up his account on his phone. The number was so low, he closed the app before anyone could see the screen. That was the moment. Not inspiration, not curiosity, shame. The specific kind of shame that comes from knowing you should have done something years ago and didn't. The kind that makes your ears hot and your stomach tight. But here's what shame did for Dwayne that confidence never did for Scott. Scott opened his first brokerage account at 28 with excitement. He'd read 2 books, he told his friends, he posted about it, and that confidence, that feeling of being ahead, quietly became the most expensive emotion of his financial life. Because confidence doesn't create urgency, it creates comfort. And comfort creates gaps. According to Vanguard's How America Saves report, the average American worker contributes about 7.7% of their salary to a retirement plan. But that's an average. It hides the gaps, the years people skip, reduce, or pause contributions because they feel like they're already doing enough. Scott had 4 of those years. Dwayne had 0. Dwayne never felt like he was doing enough. That's the point. The shame never went away. It just became fuel. He didn't tell anyone he'd started investing. He didn't celebrate. He didn't post. He just set the auto deposit and let the shame do the work that confidence couldn't. The cost? Every year Scott coasted on confidence and skipped or reduced a contribution, the gap widened. Not by much in any single year, but compound interest doesn't need much. A single skipped year at $500 a month, $6,000, doesn't just cost $6,000, At 8% over the remaining timeline, that 1 year of missed deposits could grow to $15,000 or $18,000 by retirement. Multiply that by 4 gap years and the cost of confidence starts to look like a second car, except Scott never bought it. He just lost it invisibly, silently, one comfortable year at a time. But if shame was the fuel, what was the engine? This is where the calculator matters. Dwayne didn't use it to analyze stocks. He didn't use it to calculate returns. He used it the same way every month. Punch in 460, confirm the deposit went through, put the calculator back next to the thermos. Done. One index fund, one automatic contribution, one number to verify. That was the entire system. He didn't choose simplicity because he believed in it. He chose it because he didn't know enough to do anything else. He'd never heard of sector rotation. He didn't know what rebalancing meant. He couldn't explain the difference between a growth fund and a value fund. So he picked the one option on his 401k menu that said index and never changed it. And that ignorance, that absolute, honest, undecorated lack of financial sophistication became the most powerful structural advantage he ever had because Scott had sophistication. Scott had 4 apps, 12 positions across 3 accounts. He rebalanced every quarter. He checked his portfolio daily, sometimes twice. He reacted to every Fed announcement, every inflation report, every headline that said the word recession. Every year, Dalbar publishes a study that measures how much the average investor actually earns compared to what the market returns. Over the 20 years ending in 2024, the S&P 500 returned about 10.3% a year. The average equity investor, 9.2%. That gap, just over 1% a year, might sound small. But on a $100,000 portfolio over 20 years, it's the difference between roughly $670,000 and $590,000, $80,000 gone. Not to fees, not to taxes, to decisions. Dwayne's monthly ritual was the only interaction he had with his money. Punch in the number, confirm the transfer, close the app, put the calculator back. That was the entire relationship. He didn't know enough to complicate it. He didn't know enough to improve it. And that absence of knowledge, the honest, total lack of a second move to make, meant his money sat in the market month after month, year after year, completely undisturbed by the one force that destroys more wealth than any recession, its owner. The best investment strategy is the one too simple to touch. Dwayne had it by accident. Scott spent 20 years optimizing his way past it. Scott knew more, but knowing more created a problem Dwayne never had. This is the one that separates the late starters who build wealth from the ones who blow up. When Dwayne started investing at 50, he never once thought, I need to make up for lost time. He thought, I need to stop making it worse. That framing, stop the bleeding versus win the race, changes everything about how a person invests. The stop the bleeding mindset leads to index funds, automatic deposits, and boring consistency. The make up for lost time mindset leads to concentrated bets, speculative plays, and the kind of decisions that feel urgent and productive but statistically destroy wealth. Scott lived in the second mindset, not because he started late, he started early, but because by his mid-40s, his portfolio hadn't grown the way the calculators promised. Too many trades, too many switches, too many years of reacting to the market instead of just being in it. So he tried to accelerate. He put money into cryptocurrency at 52, bought individual tech stocks based on tips, sold everything during the 2020 correction, and waited for a better entry point. The entry point never felt right. Over any 15-year rolling period, the SPIVA scorecard shows that roughly 90% of actively managed large-cap funds underperform the S&P 500. 90%. And those are professional managers, full-time analysts with research teams, and Bloomberg terminals. Scott was trying to beat the market with a phone app and a Substack subscription. Dwayne didn't know what a PE ratio was. He didn't know what a stop loss was. He couldn't explain market capitalization if his job depended on it. And that ignorance, every layer of it, protected him from every optimization that cost Scott money. He wasn't trying to catch up. He was trying not to fall further behind. And the market rewarded that modesty far more generously than it rewarded Scott's ambition. The gap isn't theoretical. If Dwayne earned roughly the index return on his contributions over 15 years, and Scott underperformed the index by even 1% a year due to bad timing and active trading, which Dalbar data says is conservative, the dollar difference on similar contributions over similar periods is tens of thousands of dollars. Not because Dwayne was smarter, because Dwayne didn't try to be smart. But when the market really dropped, when it dropped hard, that's when the difference between the two became irreversible. March 2020, the S&P 500 dropped 34% from its peak in about 33 days. Financial media ran the word crash in every headline. Brokerages saw record login activity. Millions of investors sold everything. Dwayne didn't log in. Not because he was disciplined, not because he had a strategy memo pinned to his wall, because a 34% drop in a number on a screen didn't register as real pain to a man who'd spent 2 months unemployed in 2009, stretched one paycheck across 3 weeks of groceries, and sat in his truck in the parking lot of a temp agency wondering whether he'd make rent. The calculator sat on the table. He didn't touch it. The thermos was full, and the wrapper was on the table, and the fluorescent light was buzzing, and the market was in free fall, and Dwayne was thinking about what to have for dinner. Because the number going down on a screen didn't feel like a crisis to a man who'd eaten rice and beans for 11 straight days in 2009. That was a crisis. This was arithmetic. This is something the financial literacy world almost never talks about. Emotional resilience in the market isn't built by reading about bear markets. It's built by surviving real physical material hardship, the kind that has nothing to do with portfolios. People who've been through layoffs, medical bills, months of tight budgets, they've already calibrated what actual loss feels like. A red number on a screen doesn't reach that depth. Scott had never been unemployed, never missed a paycheck. His first real encounter with market fear was 2008. He watched his portfolio drop 40% in 5 months. He sold not at the bottom, nobody knows the bottom in real time. He sold somewhere in the middle when the pain was sharpest. Then he waited. 14 months later, he re-entered the market after it had already recovered more than 50% of what it lost. He did the same thing in 2020. This time, he came back sooner, 9 months. But the damage was the same. He sold the fear and bought the relief. The S&P 500 lost more than half its value during 2008. It took over 5 years to reach new highs, but it did reach them. And every dollar that stayed invested during those 5 years doubled again in the 5 years that followed. Dwayne's dollars stayed, Scott's didn't. The market doesn't test your knowledge. It tests your scars. But surviving the market is only half of it. The other half is what happens to the money before it reaches the brokerage. Dwayne's lifestyle was already locked at a modest baseline when he started investing at 50. The truck with 200,000 miles on it. Same house he'd been in for 18 years. Same thermos, same lunch routine in the same break room. He didn't consciously choose frugality as a strategy. He just never had a reason to change anything. And when he started investing, every new dollar went straight to the account because there was no lifestyle expansion competing for it. Scott received 6 salary increases between the ages of 30 and 45. His income went from $65,000 to $95,000 a year. That's $30,000 more per year. Over 15 years, that's $450,000 in additional gross income that Dwayne never had. But Scott's savings rate didn't move because every raise came with an upgrade, a new car, a better apartment, then a house with a higher mortgage. Restaurants went from casual to reservations. Vacations went from driving distance to international. None of this was reckless. None of it was irresponsible. It was normal. It's what people do when they earn more. But each upgrade locked in a new baseline of spending, and the gap between what Scott earned and what Scott kept barely changed in 15 years. If Scott had kept his spending at the level of his first salary and invested the difference even without any other change, the additional capital alone would have compounded into a 6-figure sum by retirement. That's not a hypothetical number. At 8% annual returns over 15 years, an extra $1,000 a month turns into roughly $347,000. Dwayne didn't have that option. He never got the raises. His salary crept up maybe $8,000 in 19 years, barely enough to keep pace with inflation. But the absence of raises became its own kind of shield. There was nothing to inflate, no new tier of spending to lock in. Every dollar he invested was real carved from a budget that didn't have any slack in it. $460 a month wasn't comfortable. It meant saying no to things. It meant driving the truck past 200,000 miles instead of trading it in. It meant the same thermos, the same lunch, the same break room. But every one of those small refusals was an investment that Scott, with all his income advantages, never made. Scott looked at his portfolio every day and reacted. Dwayne looked once a year, and that's where the 6th trait comes in. Dwayne measured input. Did the money leave my account this month? That's the only question the calculator answered. $460. Confirmed. Done. He didn't measure returns. He didn't know his allocation percentage. He didn't track whether this quarter beat last quarter. He had no idea how his portfolio compared to the S&P 500 or to anyone else. Scott measured output. How much did I gain? How much did I lose? Am I up this month or down, red or green? He checked every day, sometimes during his lunch break, sometimes before bed, and every time the number was red, something happened in his brain, an impulse to act, to move money, to do something. Because watching your money shrink and doing nothing feels like negligence. It feels like you're failing. But the data says the opposite. A widely cited study from Fidelity examined which brokerage accounts performed best over a 10-year stretch. The answer surprised the researchers. The top performers were accounts that were inactive, accounts belonging to investors who had either passed away or forgotten they had the account. No trades, no reactions, no panic selling, just money sitting in the market, uninterrupted by human emotion. That's what Dwayne was, a living version of a forgotten account. Not because he forgot, because he never learned to watch. He measured the one thing that was in his control, the contribution, and ignored the one thing that wasn't the performance. That mental structure, as crude as it was, eliminated the entire emotional cycle that cost Scott thousands of dollars a year in bad decisions. Think about what Scott's brain processed every single day. Green, a little dopamine hit, a feeling of validation, maybe a temptation to buy more of what's winning. Red, a spike of cortisol, a feeling that something is wrong, an impulse to fix it by doing something, anything. Multiply that cycle by 250 trading days a year for 22 years, and you get a man whose entire emotional life is wired to react to fluctuations that mean nothing over a 15-year timeline. Dwayne didn't build that wiring. He couldn't react to something he never saw. You want to know who sleeps well at night? The person who watches what goes in. You want to know who lies awake? The person who watches what comes out. But there's one last trait, and it's the one that made all the others inevitable. Dwayne knew he had 15 years. Not roughly, not plenty of time. 15 years, he was 50. He wanted to stop working at 65. That gave him 180 months to build something from nothing. Every month that passed without a deposit was a month he couldn't get back, and he felt every single one. The calculator he bought when his daughter started middle school, she's 27 now, that span of time, from middle school to adulthood, is exactly the length of Dwayne's entire investing career. 15 years. It sounds short because it is short, and that shortness is what made Dwayne treat every dollar like it mattered, because it did. Scott had what Dwayne never had: unlimited runway, or at least that's what it felt like. He opened his brokerage account at 28 with 37 years until 65. 37 years. The number was so large it felt abstract, and abstract numbers don't create urgency. So Scott skipped contributions in 2011 because he was saving for a kitchen remodel. Skipped 2014 because he rolled an old 401 kick into an IRA and told himself he'd optimize the allocation first. Paused in 2017 because the market felt overheated. Each gap was small. Each one felt rational. But 5 years of missed contributions at even a modest amount, say $500 a month, doesn't just cost $30,000 in principal. At 8% annual return over the remaining timeline, those 5 missing years cost an additional $40,000 to $60,000 in growth that never happened. Dwayne never skipped, not once. Not because he was more disciplined by nature, because he couldn't afford to. The deadline was real. It was close. And every time he thought about waiting or pausing, the math was right there in front of him on the same calculator with the same plastic keys. The people who start at 25 are given a gift and a curse: time. The gift is compound growth. The curse is the feeling that there's always more of it. That the money you didn't invest this month can be invested next month, and it won't matter because you have decades ahead of you. Except it does matter. And it compounds. Not the money, the habit. Every skipped month makes the next skip easier. Every gap reinforces the illusion that gaps are free. And by the time you're 52 and realize they weren't, the math has already absorbed the cost quietly, invisibly, in returns that never happened on deposits that never arrived. Dwayne never had that illusion. The deadline was always visible, and that visibility is the most expensive thing Scott never had. Put the 7 side by side. Shame instead of confidence. One rule instead of a system. Stop the bleeding instead of chase the recovery. scars from real life instead of theory from books, a locked lifestyle instead of an escalating one, input measured, output ignored, a short deadline that killed procrastination. Now, look at that list again. Every single trait on it looks like a disadvantage. Starting from shame, that sounds like a weakness. Having one rule because you don't know enough to have two, that sounds like ignorance. Not trying to catch up, that sounds like giving up. Never upgrading your lifestyle, that sounds like deprivation. But here's the turn. Every single one of those traits protected Dwayne from the most expensive mistakes in personal finance. The behavior gap that cost the average investor more than 1% a year in lost returns. The lifestyle inflation that swallows raises whole. The panic selling that locks in losses during the exact weeks the market is cheapest. The overtrading that makes brokerage accounts underperform accounts that are literally abandoned. 90% of actively managed funds can't beat a simple index over 15 years. And Scott, with 4 apps, 12 positions, 3 newsletters, and 22 years of head start, thought he could do what 90% of professionals couldn't. Dwayne didn't think he could beat anything. He just showed up every month. Same calculator, same $460, same fund, and the 7 traits he built not by choice, but by circumstance turned out to be the exact architecture that the market rewards most generously. What looks like limitation is exactly what prevented Dwayne from committing the errors that cost Scott 22 years of advantage. The calculator was never a financial tool, it was a psychological one. The monthly ritual of punching in 460 and confirming the deposit, that was the act that kept all 7 traits alive at the same time. It kept the shame active, it enforced the one rule, it measured input, not output, it marked another month off the deadline. Every month, same keys, same number, same thermos beside it. That's not a strategy, that's armor. Friday night, break room, fluorescent light still buzzing, wrapper on the table, thermos with the dented cap, calculator with the big plastic keys. He invested with shame while others invested with confidence. He followed one rule while others built systems. He stopped the bleeding while others chased the recovery. He survived real loss before the market ever tested him. He never upgraded while others inflated every raise. He watched what went in while others watched what came out. And he had a deadline that made every dollar serious while others had the luxury of time and wasted it. $780,000 on $56,000 a year in 15 years, not because he knew more, because he needed less. And every deficit became a wall between him and the mistakes that quietly destroyed Scott's 22-year head start. Starting late might be the most dangerous advantage in personal finance. Not because it's better, because it leaves no room for the errors that only feel affordable when you think you have time. If this changed how you see your own timeline, subscribe. Did you start like Dwayne or like Scott?